All right, welcome back, everybody. Let's go on to part two and continue our discussion and learn about an integrated and holistic approach to relieving lower back pain. Now, we covered the statistics, the facts. We talked about the non-specific, the people that can't figure out, or those people that have back pain and practitioners can't figure them out. So the non-specific, they can't identify the specific reason for their back pain. The orthopedic dilemma, despite all the advancements in technology, education, orthopedic and primary care medicine, physical therapy, and corrective exercise, why are we still seeing a continued rise in lower back pain and injuries? All the years that I've been in the industry and have worked indirectly or directly with people that have had lower back pain, I've written about it, I presented on it, and I have watched the statistics continually grow, even though our education and technologies have grown. Why are we still seeing this orthopedic dilemma? And it doesn't just have to be back pain, it can be knee pain and rheumatoid arthritis or whatever. Remember, I was saying it's a broad topic, but I'm going to focus on lower back pain. So it's very perplexing. And what I found in my years and years of experience was embracing an integrated and holistic approach. And based on the various practitioners that I've studied with, worked for, where I go to school and study about spinal structure and function, corrective exercise, holistic nutrition. And it brings me back not only to this slide, which I often use when I'm consulting with people, and specifically in the last 20 years, I also look at the body as a cybernetic bioelectric magnetic organism. But I've always looked at it as an integrated multidimensional system of systems. The body systems are interconnected and dependent upon one another to function. I think what's missing is educating people that the body's interconnected. This whole reductionist looking at parts, which is how medicine has always been viewed. So we break each body part down, and we see specialists for your heart. We see orthopedic specialists, hand specialists. We have emotional, behavioral health specialists. And what we got away from a long time ago was looking at the body as an integrated, multidimensional system of systems, because each system is dependent on one another to function. Now, I just had this conversation, interestingly enough, with a client through an email. She emailed me and said her atlas was out, and she sees someone for her atlas. In the image, the red part is the first cervical vertebrae or the atlas. To adjust it, and we're trying to get that to hold. And there's a lot of things that are causing that atlas not to stay in a position. So this is the reason why I do teach my clients and the public this approach to looking at the body as a whole and not the sum of its parts. There's more than one reason why the atlas won't stay into position, or any vertebrae or joint structure, why it doesn't hold or why there's a challenge there. Well, this is why we have to look at the body as a whole and not the sum of its parts. So in her case, yes, I'm going to start working on strengthening the muscles that are weak. So basically what you have is you have muscles that are long and weak and short and tight. And what I want to do is I want to get to the why behind either one. In this case, we'll talk about the tightness, because she has some tightness in those neck muscles. So I look at the reasons why the muscles get tight, and part of the reason is, yes, because they're out of alignment, but there also is an emotional or a neurological overstimulation that is causing that as well. And this is going to segue right into what we're going to be talking about, that the limbic emotional system of the body. The limbic system is a group of brain structures that play a critical role in processing emotions and regulating emotional response. Yes, the limbic system, particularly the amygdala, is neurologically linked to the muscles of the neck. Emotional processing and motor control, the amygdala processes the emotional information, initiates response. It has connections that can influence the motor neurons, including those controlling the neck muscles, the muscles of the neck, stress response, and muscle tension. So I'm helping her to understand that this is why we are addressing lifestyle. So that goes back down to this image here. Remember, she doesn't have a neck problem, she's got a body problem. This is the same thing with the lower back. But these unhealthy lifestyle factors, specifically when we look at the amygdala and the limbic emotional system and its direct correlation with the stomach, because the digestive system, in this case, what they call the gut-brain axis. Researchers at UCLA have known that the brain sends signals to your gut, which is why stress and other emotions can contribute to gastrointestinal systems and vice versa. So you see how the arrows go both ways. So depending on how a person manages their stress and their digestion and what they're eating and how stimulated they are, will have an effect on the amygdala, the limbic emotional system, in this case. And there's a lot of mitigating factors, but this is what I'm up against out here, is helping people, my clients and people, that's why I'm doing this, understand that if you're not getting well and you're not staying physically well, if your low back pain is not going away, it's because we're not using a holistic and integrated approach. It takes teamwork to make the dream work. My clients have a dream, and if the team is not coordinating its efforts, then that dream will not be fulfilled. We already talked about this in the first video, in the first part. Now, today, we're going to talk about quick fix advertisements, facts, what's missing, and then we're going to get into the 4 major stressors. We're going to get into the first major stressor, and that is emotional stress. But let's start by looking at these quick fix advertisements. What I mean by this is there's a term out there called the one-trick pony. Brian, you need to buy this device, put it in your clinic. I used to get these offers all the time when I had a facility. You need to get this piece of equipment, this technology, put it in your center, and it will reduce inflammation. It could build bone. It depends on what the device is. And I'm not going to get specific because I don't want to put out a bad message about these devices, because a lot of them do work. We had a lot of them at the various clinics where I worked out of or subcontracted out of. You need to get this because it'll increase your revenue. So then lately, as you know how artificial intelligence works. So let's say I'm looking up, ozone therapy or stem cell therapy. I'm looking it up on the internet. And then all of a sudden in my Facebook feed, I'm getting advertisements for selling equipment for your facility, or I'm seeing local practitioners in my geographical area, selling their wares, decompression treatments, stem cell therapy, variety of different devices, technologies, or maybe just their service. My challenge to each one of them is, sure, you can use one way because they'll say, well, this is what's helped my patients. And I don't doubt we had a lot of success with Russian stimulation, electrical stimulation, and ultrasound. We did. But again, there's no one way. So if let's say you're getting decompression on your lower back, and we did a lot of decompression work. Well, are they complementing that with a corrective exercise strategy? And then you have to ask yourself a question: why are we having so much compression? Why are we having stenosis? Is there deterioration? Obviously, there is deterioration happening. So if we go, let me show you here. So you may have a thinning of the disc, you may have disc degeneration. So if you're losing height, you need some sort of decompression. There's other reasons why you need decompression. You may have a bulging disc. But my point is, so you come to me and you have osteophytes, thinning, degeneration. And then I got to create a specific corrective exercise strategy that's specific for that spinal condition. However, we also have to look at other structural imbalances. Are there imbalances above and below? Are there other mitigating factors like lifestyle? Are you toxic and your bones are getting brittle? Are you dehydrated and you're not absorbing your water? Is your posture contributing to it? And of course, if you're feeling stressed about it, so like I said, you can get quick relief, which I'm all about, because remember, people they want their symptoms resolved, don't they? But the reason I'm putting out this video is because of all the clients that I've seen and the people that I've talked to that were frustrated because they tried these one-trick ponies. And what we did is we presented an option. Yes, you can get the electrical stim and the Russian stimulation, and it will accelerate your rehab. But you're probably going to want to complement that with corrective exercise. And let me teach you a little bit about what you can do in your lifestyle to help mitigate the other reasons why that joint's having a problem. So all you do is present it as an option. You don't have to do it. You could just get the ultrasound, go get the decompression, and odds are, you're probably going to get better. And, there's a lot of good to that. You can get back to work quicker and get back to life. But if you're very physical in your job and you're like to stay fit, then you're going to end up back in our care quicker. Because just because you're out of pain doesn't mean that the structure is back to optimal functioning. Just because you got decompression doesn't mean that you still got to stand, sit, bend, twist, move all day long. And if the structure doesn't have support, especially if you already have a pre-existing challenge, remember that's going to increase your risk for re-injury. So the other option are for people that are fed up with that, sick and tired of being sick and tired. So all I'm saying is be aware of misleading advertisements. I see it all the time. And the facts are, again, that there's no one way to treat it. Like I was explaining to my client, you can go to the Atlas chiropractor, the Atlas specialist, you can go to your chiropractor. But know that you're going to have to do something about the stress, whether it's emotional, whether it's thermal, there might be hormonal imbalances going on, definitely digestive. So nutrition will have to be mitigated. And sleep, that's the truth. And if you know that and you still go forward, then at least you knew it. then you're empowered with the truth. But if you find out later that the quick fix didn't give you the full picture, and then you learn later on that, wow, I wish I would have known, I would have done decompression with corrective exercise. I would have done ultrasound or stem cell, whatever treatments that they have out there. And I can show you how to stimulate your own stem cells. If I would have known these other things, then I would have done things differently, Brian. That's what I said about my education. If I would have known what I didn't know at the Czech Institute and learning from the neurologists I work with and the naturopaths I ended up working with on me and with my clients and all the other education that I got after the 21st century, God, I wish I would have known that at the beginning of my career. Thank God I had an open mind and I got at it quick, because in the 90s I was already open-minded. I was already going down the road less traveled, thinking outside the box. So what's missing? Integrated, holistic. Holistic means we're going to do this without drugs. And whether we're looking at holistics with a W, mind, body, and spirit. Okay, I'm not ready for that. Okay, then we'll look at holistics with an H. And I'm gonna use mindful movement exercises. I'm going to teach you how to breathe correctly. I'm going to increase your chi energy. I may recommend you to go see an acupuncturist. I may recommend myofascial therapy. I may recommend energy work, cupping. See, holistic. But if it's holistic with a W, then we need to address your mind, your body, and your spirit, which leads us into emotional stress. The mind is the weakest muscle in the body. Another important aspect is education. In order for you to raise your emotional health rating, I also provide you with ways to learn. So this article is on my blog page, on my website, empowering people with knowledge so that they can take that information and apply it. Retrain your mind. Cells that fire together learn to wire together. You can retrain your mind. I had explained when I rate, because you guys know that I rate and rank each principle, whether you're looking at the 4 stressors or what I call the 4 principles, I rate them. And what did I say? That the highest rating is usually in the emotional health area. Because again, the limbic emotional section of the brain, where we process what we're perceiving or what we had perceived in our past. That's how memories get stored and we get triggered. Ever have a triggered emotion? And when we get excited on from a red line perspective, because there's good stress, you're excited because you're in love. Or there's a bad stress, you're pissed off because you're getting a divorce. Both of those are stressors. They both have to be modulated. Too much of a good thing isn't a good thing, right? And it has a direct effect on the other principles. It has a direct effect on the whole body because it's all connected. Dr. Candace Pert was an internationally recognized neuroscientist, molecular biologist, and author of the book Molecules of Emotion. That's what energy is. It's energy in motion, emotion. Cells are lined with specific receptors that only certain molecules can attach themselves to. These molecules are like messages that communicate between body, mind, neurons, glands, and immune cells. Cells that fire together, wire together. Our feelings change this mixture of peptides. As our feelings change, so as you have the good or the bad. So if you have a good feeling, you got good peptides. We'll keep it simple for you. If you have negative or bad, then you got bad peptides. As our feelings change, this mixture of peptides travels throughout our body, your body, and your brain. And they're literally changing the chemistry of every cell in your body. After you're upset, did you ever feel your muscles get tight? Well, I'm here to empower you guys with a lot of education. Brain, organs, and tissues. If energy going through an organ, so when you're in fear. Fear is held in the middle lower back, the lower back primarily. All right, so just above the navel, below the navel. And that section of the body, when we're looking at organs, we have our kidneys, and then above our kidneys, we have our adrenal glands. And that's where we store a lot of fear. Now, fear can get stored anywhere in the body. Our emotional issues can get stored in the tissues. And an example would be these big psoas muscles, as shown in this image. When we are under fear and feeling unsafe, so maybe you're going through a divorce, you just lost your job, you're going to foreclose on your house, that could piss you off. So piss, pee, kidneys. So when we're peeved or pissed, that's an emotional response. And because of where the psoas is located, as indicated in this image, it is the bridge between the upper torso and the lower. It attaches to the spine, so it's also a spine stabilizer. It's in association with the diaphragm, so it can also affect diaphragmatic function. But when there's trouble in your life, like you're going through divorce, or you're losing your job, or the mortgage on your house is due and you don't have the money, you can't move forward in life, and you use the psoas to move forward. Now, the reason I'm mentioning all this is more from a psychological perspective, because emotional health or stress has a direct relationship to lower back pain. And physiological functioning, which I rate for my clients. So when we look at like this slide here, physiological stress load rating, what is your readiness for exercise? So as your physiological stress load goes up, you have a decreased tolerance for exercise. But we could also say that we also are moving away from wellness and movement. So we're moving towards disease. And as we bring that load down, then we're moving back to health. So in this article, stress is a natural response to challenging or threatening situations, depending on the type of stress it is. And it's how we perceive it. While acute stress can be beneficial in certain situations where enhanced performance, improved memory, heightened awareness, and cognitive function are required, chronic stress, which is what we're mostly under nowadays, can have a profound negative effect on health. The psoas is often referred to as the fight or flight muscle and is one of the primary muscles involved in the body's stress response. When stimuli are perceived as threatening or dangerous, the body instinctively activates the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis. And you see all the hormones. And again, remember I was saying, if you want to get to the cause, this is what practitioners need to look at. This is why I ask my clients, how are you sleeping? What kind of stress are you under? What kind of stress were you under? What were the most highest stressful situations in your life? Just name 5 that happened between when you can remember, maybe age 5 to your current age. What were the 5 greatest stressors in your life? And that gets stored in your body. And then the stress you're going under now, like I said, maybe somebody just got their divorce papers, or their mortgage is being foreclosed. So now you go into fight to flight, and now your hormones are in disarray. The main stress response system linking perceived stress. Now, the key word here is perceived. This is where I help my clients with mind training. We have to change the perception of the stress that we're encountering. So linking perceived stress to the physiological responses. Activation of the HPA axis triggers the release of the stress hormones, cortisol and adrenaline from the adrenal gland. And now that goes back to our other image, and now you see the connection. All that explanation to show you how the body is interconnected and why we need to look at the emotional aspects of our client's lifestyle.
The psoas is often called the fight or flight muscle because of its strong link to the autonomic nervous system, which manages our stress responses. When we encounter a stressful situation, the sympathetic nervous system triggers increased muscle tension, including the psoas. This prepares the body for quick action, whether that's running away, bracing for impact, or engaging in a fight. Because of its connection to the diaphragm, increased tension in the psoas can also restrict deep breathing. This often leads to shorter, shallower breath, which, while useful for quick bursts of action, can reduce the efficiency of oxygen exchange over time and contributes to a feeling of being on edge.
In this article, Muscle of the Soul, they talk a lot about the psoas being the deepest core muscle. And as Daniel Olson states, it's the muscle of the soul. This core stabilizing muscle located near the hip bone affects mobility, structural balance, joint function, flexibility, and much more. In addition to its function to help keep the body upright and moving, the psoas is believed to allow you to connect with the present moment, especially when it is stretched out and tension is released from the body. Research indicates that the psoas is vital to our psychological well-being in addition to structural health. Liz Cook, author of the psoas book, states that our psoas literally embodies our deepest urge for survival and more profoundly our elemental desire to flourish. So when they mention when tension is released from the body, and if you look at the top bullet point, increase in tone of such muscles, when the brain overstimulates the organ, the excess heat gets dumped into the tissues. And like it says above, the organ overheats, the organ will dump the excess energy into the muscles it shares neurological relationship with. And what we're talking about here is the neurological relationship to the psoas. They're neurologically linked. So what does that mean? Does anybody know what that means? Neurologically linked. So my earbuds, because I don't use earbuds, my earbuds, see, I put those in my ear when I'm on my phone. I connect that in my phone. It's neurologically linked. Well, in this case, it's electronically linked to my phone. Plug them in and I can talk and listen. So your kidneys and adrenals are neurologically linked to your psoas muscles. And look how big they are. And when you're under stress, you can get tight, correct? Ever get a tight neck after you've been upset? Okay, so you overheat an organ, and you think the brain's going to protect your organ or your tissue first? So where's it going to throw the rest of the energy? Some of the energy is going to be absorbed by the organ, but where's the rest of it going to be absorbed? The tissue. So when you plug too many things into a light socket, where does the energy get absorbed? The circuit breaker trips it. Now the psoas is tight. We call that tone or tonic. It's a tonic response. You see the spinal column? And you see the piano keys? But in the image, you see the numbers here. We're going to pick 3, 4, 5, 6. So that's stomach, small intestine, pancreas, liver, and colon. Oh, let's go down to 8, 9, and 10, because then we can include the kidney, because that's our part of our topic here is the kidneys are neurologically linked to the psoas. So you have too many things plugged into your light socket, and then if I had each one of these vertebrae, so here's a vertebrae, here's a vertebrae, here's a vertebrae, and these vertebrae are neurologically linked. Remember the numbers 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So maybe like T5 to T9, that's digestion. Okay, so you're fired up and you get pissed and you stay pissed, and that will overheat that section, and that could sublux that joint too. You won't even know it's happening. Well, sometimes you can feel it, but a lot of times I'll go in to get adjusted from my friend in North Carolina, and he'll find one of these vertebrae out up here between my shoulder blades up here. And you'll say, oh, how's your digestion? Because you'll find it out. Muscle gets toned, pulls on the joint, and then your vertebrae gets kind of out of alignment. They call it subluxation. So what are we learning here? The mind, right? Candace Pert, the mind and all the stress and all the negative thoughts. Just listen to people, listen to yourself. We're so hard on ourselves as human beings. We have more negative thoughts than we do positive. Now, I teach my clients mind training and what I call, the Buddhists call right thinking, because these are habits we've developed. If you were always told that you're no good, when you do no good or you don't do as good as you want to, you will say that to yourself or you'll think that. God, I'm no good. I don't like that when kids say, my bad, because they're telling themselves that they're bad. My bad. No, it's not yours. It's there. The thing you did wasn't good, but do your best not to reinforce it or repeat it, because like a computer, every time you give a command to a computer, it builds a memory. Your body, going back to what Candace Pert says here, our feelings change the mixture of peptides. Now, I'm not talking about positive thinking here, Norman Vincent Peale. No, no, no. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about self-talk. So what I have my clients do is I have them correct it. The Buddhists refer to this as right thinking, so correcting that thought. And when you correct the wrong in a good way, it's okay. Call it yourself an idiot. That's all right. If you do it and you're laughing and you're goofing around, it's one thing. But if you're serious, I'm so stupid, And you do that every day, that's programming. Remember, cells that fire together wire together. Thoughts affect everything from your heart rate, digestive ability, and posture, and are cumulative in nature. So again, the repetition of a small thing can have a major impact on your chemistry, which can have a major impact on inflammation and your posture. Posture has been long known. They call it somatics. So if I may entertain you here, so I'll go to somebody else I studied, Thomas Hanna. Now, I got this book back in the late 90s, and I really started to implement it right after I moved to North Carolina. In my phase one system, that's all reprogramming and restoration. So the exercises in this book were perfect. They allowed me to work with the client without putting them in a state of sympathetic stress. And I also will mention that at the Czech Institute, they apply a lot of these methods in their corrective exercise strategies. Hanna Somatic Education, also known as Hanna Somatics, is a system of movement exercises designed to re-educate the brain and nervous system to release chronic muscular tension and pain. It focuses on retraining the body's movement patterns and enhancing sensory awareness, helping individuals regain control over their muscles and improve their ability to move comfortably. So what is it? Neuromuscular education is a form of mind-body training that directly addresses the brain's role in organizing muscle contractions and movement. Sensory motor training, it involves learning to be more aware of body sensations and re-engaging the brain's ability to relax and lengthen muscles. So in the first step, when I work with somebody, especially in pain, that's all restoration and reprogramming. A lot of these muscles are, they're inhibited, they're turned off, they have amnesia, like it says, addressing sensory motor amnesia. And getting that person back in touch with their body, getting them back to feel and to sense their body through movement. They're slow, they're gentle, they're done with breath so as to bring them out of that sympathetic state of fight, flight, and freeze. As the body goes into survival mode, stress increases, causing an elevation in heart rate, the hormone adrenaline. You elevate stomach acid and respiration. This is known as fight, flight, or freeze response. This response begins a compensatory cascade of muscle tightening and weakening, thus creating muscle imbalances which can ultimately lead to lower back pain. So deep within the body, you have a deep set of stabilizer muscles. We're going to get into this a lot more under physical health. Your outer core versus your inner core. Maybe that's what you need to see now, because we're going to talk about digestion and stress. So let's get to the inner and outer core. Okay, so here's your outer core here in this diagram. So it's the outside chest down to those big hip flexor muscles, the psoas I was talking about, from your upper traps to your glutes. Now there's your outer core, but the ones that we're talking about here are your inner core muscles, the deep ones, so transverse abdominis, diaphragm, multifidus, and pelvic floor. So you're in fight, flight, and freeze, which is a sympathetic response. So you're overly stimulated, going back to the amygdala, the limbic emotional system. The body is designed to handle stress. It was always designed that way, but it wasn't designed to handle it 24/7 the way we are living our lives now, because we're overstimulated, we're too busy. The technology industry has increased our needs and our desires to want things faster. And then the technology itself is augmenting our bioelectrical system, which all of this is geared from. All of these systems in the body are bioelectric. So the autonomic nervous system, so you understand that the nervous system has to do with the electrical system, right? What am I getting at here? Emotional stress can inhibit the body's spinal stabilizers. So again, somebody comes to me, they haven't, over a period of time, their back pain comes back, goes away, comes back. And then I sit down and have this conversation with them and say, well, but this is what's missing. So tell me about how you handle stress. Do you react to stress? Do you respond to stress? Have you ever went through trauma in your life, PTSD? How are your organs? Do you have any digestive issues? Do you have, acid reflux? Do you have any irritations in your digestion that you're aware of? You may not even be aware that you have them, but are you aware of anything going on in there? Are you constipated? Do you pee more than normal? So here you'll see digestion. So I would say 85 to 90% of the people that I see have some sort of digestive dysfunction of some shape or form. Visceral somatic reflexes. A viscerosomatic reflex occurs when an internal organ, viscera, initiates a reflex response in a related somatic structure, bones, muscles, joints. This means that pain or other sensations originating from an organ can be felt in a different part of the body, often in a predictable pattern. For example, heart attacks might cause pain in the left arm due to the visceral nerves, referring pain to the related somatic structures. These inner core muscles are reflexive, and they're on the autonomic nervous system. So they're automatic, like your heart and respiration. These are two things that are happening automatically without you having to think about it. But when the reflexes are slowed down or they're kind of not working real well, that's what they mean by inhibited, right? So you're overly stimulated. So you just found out that your house is going to get foreclosed, let's say. And then you produce all the stomach acid. Now your stomach's in a knot. Your inner core gets, let's just say, like if we think of it like the volume on a radio, so 10 being too loud, so the digestive system was at a 10 because you heard that your house was being foreclosed, and now these muscles get downregulated, and we don't want them downregulated. And what I mean by that is we need them to reflex because we need them on. But if you have lower back pain, that means they're not working. So we need to get them back on. We need to reboot them. So the viscera, which is the middle of your body here, gets overly stimulated, it affects these tissues. Okay, this goes back to this slide here. The energy going through an organ is too high for optimal functioning. The organ overheats and it dumps the excess energy into the muscle it shares neurological relationship with. Here we're talking about your inner core muscles. Because somebody says your core is weak. Well, my core muscles are weak, Brian. Well, okay, which part of your core is weak? I don't know, it's these here, and they'll point to their midsection. Okay. Did they test your core? I haven't met too many people that have had their core tested, but if they did, it's usually the outer core that's tested. I've met nobody that had their inner core tested, and we're taught how to do that at the Czech Institute. So I run a test on their inner core, and it's not reflexing, or it's real slow, or it doesn't come on at all unless I really, show them how to do it. And that's not the purpose of the test. The purpose of the test is to give them a command to see if they can do it without instruction, detailed instruction. If that doesn't work, then we got a problem. And 98.9% of the time, it doesn't work. So I find this out, and the client says, well, how come nobody else has ever done those tests? And I said, well, that's a good question. But know this, if you're not assessing, then you're guessing, and I don't guess. I want to know. And then they'll ask me, well, why isn't it working? And that's the $10,000 question. And the first thing I teach them is that their pain itself is turning off their core. And then if they're working with me privately, then I'm teaching them about the other factors, the digestion, the emotion, the sleep, going back to lifestyle factors. It's all about education. They're coming to me again. This pain has been on and off for a long time. And this is where we want to get to the why behind their pain. Is this making sense to everybody? I hope so. Because what we're talking about here is this. And this is just the emotional part. Then another thing we look at is your diaphragm. And I'll stop after this. Now, your diaphragm, the diaphragm, while primarily a respiratory muscle, also plays a crucial role in spine stabilization by contributing to intra-abdominal pressure and attaching to the lumbar vertebrae and ribs with insertion points including the central tendon, xiphoid process, costal cartilages, and the vertebral bodies of L1 to L3 via the right and left crura, but as low as L5. And I observe their breathing pattern. So here I'm assessing a client's breathing while lying down, and you could see the majority of the air goes right up into his chest. So that's an inverted breathing pattern. And majority of the people are chest breathers. Breathing is something that we do every day. The average adult breathes approximately 12 to 20 times per minute. This translates roughly to 17 to 29,000 breaths per day. Now I want to add something here about the 1 minute breathing rate. Here in my article, part 2, Breathe Less and Live Longer. The breathing rate of the average adult male, according to a study in the 1930s, used to be about 13 times per minute. So I also test my clients' 1 minute breathing rate, which also provides me with their daily breathing rate overall. And what I've found is people are breathing too much, too fast, and invertedly. For many people, breathing is a very underestimated function, and they are unaware of the importance of proper and correct breathing. It's estimated that poor breathing plays a part in more than 75% of people visiting a doctor. So I'm watching you breathe lying down, and I'm watching to see where the air goes. Does it go down? So if you're lying flat on your back and say this is where your head is and this is where your belly button is the air going down to your belly button, or is it staying up here in your chest? The majority of people that I've tested, and I've tested all types of people, practitioners, the layperson, trainers, they're chest breathers. So their breathing is actually inverted. About when they breathe, are they using their diaphragm correctly? Is that air going down, here the arrow is, 2/3 of the breath should go down, because as your diaphragm expands downward, that's when it contracts. So it's a muscle. If you don't contract the muscle enough, it gets weak. But it doesn't, it travels up. People are breathing into their chest and they're oxygen starved, and they're not balancing out the carbon dioxide with oxygen, and they can be in a hypoxic state. A hypoxic state means a condition where tissues are not receiving enough oxygen. This can be due to a variety of factors, including low oxygen levels in the blood, hypopoxemia, reduced hemoglobin, anemic hypoxia, or impaired circulation, which can create what they would call a cytokine storm. A cytokine storm, also known as a hypercytokinemia, is a dangerous and overactive inflammatory response where the innate immune system releases excessive amounts of cytokine signaling molecules. The body's in chaos because you're not breathing right. You're starving. So people are breathing quick, there's shallow breathing, there's chest breathing, and it can have there's all kinds of breathing pattern disorders that I look at. But the very first thing I watch for is, where does the breath go? Are they a chest breather primarily, or do they have some sort of diaphragmatic function? The majority of people don't. And the ribs are really tight. Well, why is that? Well, if you're in pain, your body's guarding. You're tight around your injury because your brain is turning on muscles to protect you. Incorrect breathing can create muscle and structural imbalances. Incorrect breathing can also lead to hypoxia and hormonal imbalances, which what I was referring to before with the cytokine storm. So here I say, we breathe around 20,000 times a day. And when done incorrectly, it will overwork the muscles in the upper chest and neck. So when I look at your posture and it's pulled forward, now why are you looking at my neck when my back hurts? That's a good question. Let me show you why. This is why. Because the upper portion controls the lower portion of the spine. It's all one column. In fact, in 1908, the Lovett brothers discovered what they now call the Lovett brothers relationship. In chiropractic theory, refers to the interconnectedness of specific vertebrae in the cervical neck and the lumbar lower back regions. And this is not a theory, it's actually a fact. You see all the red vertebrae, those are all the ones in your neck. The blue is your middle of your back, and your green is the lower. So when we look at the top in the cervical vertebrae column, C1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. Cervical vertebrae 1 through 7. So as an example, cervical vertebrae number 1 talks to lumbar vertebrae number 5. So they're on the same line. They're talking to one another. So if the top is out of alignment, the bottom is out of alignment. Okay, so does that answer your question why I'm looking at your neck? Why are you looking at my neck? My back hurts. Not everybody says that. And it's a valid question because, if they come in and they're looking at me like, why are you watching me breathe? Why are you asking me about my sleep? Now, that's because a lot of people didn't realize that there was a correlation with their sleep or their lifestyle with their back pain. And I got a lot of those questions while working at the clinic. But when I got my own practice, 95% of the clients were referred to me. So by the time they got to me, they already knew that I was comprehensive, holistic, and I thought outside the box. So they weren't surprised that I was asking these questions. So they knew I was going to be looking at their breathing, asking them about their stress, looking at their food. You fill out all these questionnaires, and because you want me to get to the cause of your low back pain. Okay, so you're breathing the wrong way 20,000 times a day, so you're over-tightening the muscles in your neck and your upper chest, which is pulling your head forward. So here we have the accessory muscles, supposed to kick in during times of physical or emotional stress to meet the excessive demand for O2, oxygen. And they're not designed to be used all day, every day, yet many people that I've tested were breathing invertedly, and they're doing just that. The most common accessory muscles being used, if you look at the top arrow, that would be the SCM. The second one below it on the left would be the scalene, and the one on the right is the pectoralis minor. And then, as shown in this image, that's the levator scapula muscle, which will get overused and tight. And then, of course, the good old upper trap muscle. Who hasn't had their neck tight in that area? And that'll also contribute to postural dysfunction. We got to get your breathing right. How many people out there suffer from snoring, sleep apnea? Okay. We need to get this thing back in alignment. All right. So forward head posture. And as your head weighs more, which it does, as your body, as your head, because it weighs 8% of your body weight, as your head moves forward over the center of gravity, it weighs more. And can you imagine? Just imagine. So I did this live. I had a real muscular guy in my audience. And I said, come up here. I want to use you as an example. You don't have any pain, do you? He goes, no. So I gave him one of my dumbbells. I think it was like 20 pounds. Wasn't too heavy, but he's a big guy. And I said, I want you to hold it. I want you to hold it here. So he held it by his chest. So this would represent when your head's in good posture. Pretty easy, right? So I said, okay, now hold it out here. And then I turned to the audience and I said, no, just hold it there until I tell you to stop. And I just continued talking about forward head posture. Your head weighs more and it starts to pull on the muscles of your chest and your neck gets tight and your air gets disrupted. And I look back, I said, how you doing there? He goes, yeah, I can feel this. 3-4 minutes go by. So he was done, you know. So the example I'm drawing here is when he held that weight out there, this got sore and tired. His arm got tired, his shoulder started getting tired, it started pulling on his neck. See the association, the integration of discomfort? It wasn't just where he was holding the weight. Where your pain is not really where the problem, that's where the site of the problem might be for you because you're feeling your pain in your low back. But that's really not where the issue is. Now, not the real issue. If you got a bulging disc, yeah, I agree. If you got a bulging disc at L5, there's an issue there. But there's many other reasons why that's there, and breathing might be one of them. Now, if I were to test you seated, now I would sit them up. I'd say, okay, I want you to test your breathing seated like I'm doing here. Now, seated, it's even harder because you're working against gravity. So here I'm watching him breathe right up into his chest. And you could see the accessory muscles that are being overly facilitated. You know, the muscles of the chest and the neck. Now, of course, these are important muscles for respiration, but the ratio is all backwards. So if we're overusing them, which we are when we're chest breathing, that's going to create the probability for a forward head posture and could also create problems with their breathing function in general. So I wanted to add a little something more about proper breathing, and I'm not going to go into a whole explanation on that. I've written articles on that. There's an article here that's on my blog page. This is part 1 called Breathe Less and Live Longer. But what I wanted to add was the importance of nasal versus mouth breathing. The main point here, I teach my clients to either breathe in and out through their nose or at least breathe in through their nose and out through their mouth, because as the air runs past the hair follicles in your nose, it stimulates the parasympathetic system. Remember, the sympathetic nervous system is fight, flight, and freeze, so that's your increased stress response. Whereas the parasympathetic system cultivates more resting, digesting, and relaxing. So that's more recovery, and that'll reduce the stress. So as the air runs past the follicles in your nose, it stimulates the parasympathetic system. Then the question arises, what's the tempo of the breath? Well, I teach my clients that the exhale should be longer compared to the inhale. So let's say it takes about 3 seconds to inhale through your nostrils. It should take you about 6 seconds to exhale. Now, this is going to be different for everybody. It all depends on your breathing pattern. And you may also have a breathing dysfunction, which would take a little bit more special effort. But basically, it should be twice as long on the exhale. There's a lot to be said about nasal versus mouth breathing. I would encourage you to read part 1. And then in part 2, I have an instructional video at the end that'll help you to get started. Well, what does this have to do with my lower back? Well, everything, because your diaphragm, going back down to this image now, your diaphragm talks to your inner core. The inner core reflexes differently than the outer core at a different time. So I have my PowerPoint open, and now I have my Word program open. Two different programs, but I just integrated them together. But they're on separate, it's a separate access point. Okay? So the inner core is on its own neurological access point. It has its own wiring system compared to the outer core. So if you're going to go up a flight of stairs and you're going to lift your foot up onto the first flight, or you're going to sit down in a chair, your inner core needs to reflex without you knowing it, without you telling it what to do, needs to reflex first. Now, that's a pretty passive movement, sitting in a chair, going up a flight of stairs. Now, if you're going to run up a flight of stairs and you're going to squat with weight on your back, then that's a different reflex. I mean, that's more important that reflex works. Because if it's slow, every time you hit the stairs, like I'm going to have you run up a flight of stairs, and every time your foot hits the stairs, there's reaction forces coming from the step up your leg through your spine. Not through your spine. Well, I hope not. That force should be dissipated into the stabilization system. Well, what if your stabilization system is turned down or turned off? Well, then where are the forces going to land? In your joints. Same with the squat. If I'm gonna squat 200 pounds on my back, the minute I get underneath that bar, the minute I lift that bar off the rack, that inner core better be reflexing. Because if it's not, boy, I may get done with a set. I may be able to work out for 2 or 3 weeks. But like I had said, 76% of the population is walking around with an asymptomatic bulging disc, like me. I didn't know I had pre-existing back problems until I threw my back out in 1987, but that wasn't where the injury occurred. It happened a long time before that point. Reflex is what I'm talking about. The diaphragm talks to the transverse abdominis. The transverse abdominis talks to the multifidi, and all three of these talk to the pelvic floor. Okay, so you have your cell phone on. When you're out of range, you don't get a signal. So you can't talk on the phone, can you? All right, signal coming from your brain to those core muscles, if they don't work, you got a problem. Now I'm getting ahead of myself, but let me go back up here. All this to say, we talked about emotion. I'm looking at you breathing. You have an inverted breathing pattern. I haven't even done the core assessment yet. I just go, oh my gosh, I sit you up and it's even worse. Usually it's worse sitting than it is lying. And I'm going to be teaching you how to breathe, because what will that do to your nervous system? So if I teach you how to control your breath with your diaphragm, that will bring your sympathetic state down. That's fight, flight, and freeze. And I need to get you out of the sympathetic state, and I need to get you into parasympathetic so you can rest and digest and heal. And how do we do that? Breathing. So my client says to me, you're going to teach me how to breathe? I go, you bet. Because if I don't address that nervous system and I don't give you tools, if you're a client of mine, I'm going to give you a lot of other tools to help you mitigate your daily life. Because stress isn't going to stop out there. Henry David Thoreau said, things don't change, people do. So if I can help you to perceive life differently, then you can mitigate the crap that's going on in your life, the mortgage, the divorce, the job, the news. I can start teaching you ways of letting go of what no longer serves you. Now, the emotional part takes the longest because that's the longest programming that we have in our computer. But if I can teach you to breathe and get into that state, even if it's for a minute, I say, I want you to do this breathing exercise twice a day, lying down. And when you get really good at it lying down, I'm going to teach you how to do it sitting. And then you can do that while you're waiting to see your chiropractor. If you're waiting in the waiting room, or if you're waiting at a stoplight, or if you're waiting in line at the store, you can always take 3 or 4 breaths. And every time you do that, you're bringing yourself out of sympathetic into parasympathetic. So it's a mitigating, it's a buffer. And then you'll find over time that you won't have to think about that. Like where I'm at in my life, that's all automatic now because I still encounter stress. But I do my breathing exercises every day, and I have these mind training exercises I use every day, and like learning how to tie a shoe when you were a child or riding a bike, cells that fire together wire together. So this is just the first stressor. I hope this helps. Let it sink in. And if you have any questions or comments, leave them in the comments section or email me. But we're going to go on after this, not today. We'll go on into the next biggest one that I get, and that's the biochemical stress. All right, so remember, it's not a back problem, it's a body problem. My name is Brian Schwager, and I thoroughly enjoyed sharing part 2, and I look forward to sharing part 3 with you. Have a beautiful day, be well, and bye for now.